We're almost at the 1-year anniversary, but we've got one more banner of units to get through first, and here they are, Elsirelle and Garvall. So we know who Elsirelle is, she's in the story. Garvall, we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer to find out about him, but both these units are very interesting, and one of them sees a lot of play in Japan. So we're gonna go over their entire kits and decide whether or not you should pull for them this close to the 1-year anniversary. As per usual, we got to thank World Vision Calc for all the information, and they got the info up early from the data mine, which means we have English translations for everything already, which is another big load off my back trying to get all the names and the translations done. So thank you so much for everything that you guys do. Let's start off with Elsirelle, and she is a light unit. She has a brand new job called Nightblade, and then she has Spellblade and Dual Gunner subs, and she is an armor, helmet, and accessory user. Her stats are pretty good. Her HP is high, her attack is decent, and then her luck is also another high stat, and then she'll get some spirit from that Spellblade sub, so she's kind of looking a little tanky, a little attacky for sure. And then her master abilities are quite interesting. So she's got the HP and the light attack up for her allies and herself, but then she also gets accuracy for herself. She gets pierce resist and missile resist, and that's a little bit of a preview of the type of kit that she's going to have and the strengths that she's going to play to. She also gets more attack from her board, which is represented in the diagram there. Okay, her resistances are pretty okay. So the dark weakness is always going to be a thing, but then poison is not my favorite status ailment resistance to have. Don't move is pretty good, and stop is pretty relevant as well. For the attack type resistances, she gets missile and pierce plus, and then she gets more from her master ability. That's the little 5% there. So those are really good. There's a lot of gunners in the meta right now, and there's always Kane that's out there. However, she has no slash resist and she has no magic resist, and yes, she can supplement that with her Spellblade sub, but that is kind of concerning. Those are our two most common attack types, especially slash. There's just so many slashers out there, including herself, so that is definitely a glaring weakness, I would say, to not have anything to build off of there. And then she's weak to strike, which we do need to worry about now. That's suddenly a problem because we've got two very strong pugilists that are out as well. And then her TMR is actually very interesting as well. It gives some spirit, some accuracy, some HP, but it has the ability Wake Up Impact, increase accuracy by 30 for 3 turns for allies, and it looks like it hits you as well. This is really cool. So I really think this could be a thing in PvP, in live PvP in particular. Something that I do in my live PvP is I use both Raldor and Winter Venera's TMRs on different party members to give them the move and then the accuracy up, and that actually was quite effective at taking on evade teams. This will eliminate the need for 2 people to have accuracy TMRs. You could just have 1 person with an accuracy TMR. Everybody can stack up for maybe their mastery TMR buff, and then maybe they use Wake Up Impact and get some accuracy, and then you hop off into battle and try to take out some evade units. We'll take a look at her passives and counters next, and I'll highlight a few things. So with her passives, the new one that we want to take a look at is Nightblade Mastery. So this gives you 30% attack, 25 more accuracy, it's 35 so far, and then decreases your evasion rate, which isn't a huge deal. I don't think you'll be building her evade anyway, but that 30% attack based on her base attack is going to be 77. So that's kind of cool. That's a significant amount, I would say. And then otherwise you have Providence of Darkness, which is your magic resist to go up to 12%, and then dark resist too, which is just really solid if you're taking on Kane and you have that pierce resist and then some dark resist. Well, you can certainly get that higher and then take less damage. And then the other huge thing to think about here is tune-up, and this tune-up will actually give 6 agility to her. So I mean, there you go, there's some agility she has high luck, and then her agility is getting a little bit higher. There is some evade application there, but then the big thing here is defense penetration 40. So 40% defense penetration on just always on whenever you have this equipped. I think these are the 2 passes that you have to use. And then as for counters, well, she gets counter swing, magic guard, and predictive fire, and I think you're just going to use magic guard most of the time because it's just the defensive counters are so easy to use. You don't need anyone to be within range for you to use them. But predictive fire is also kind of interesting because it's a ranged counter. It can counter a magic attack of some kind or other gunners and kind of fire back at them before they fire at you. So that's kind of interesting. I definitely could see somebody trying that out. So what is a Nightblade, you ask? Well, let's take a look at the skills. We've got Stun Blade, which is a very small attack, but it has a 25% chance to inflict stun for 1 turn, and that's pretty good. I mean, the range isn't amazing, but still, that's just a really solid skill to have, and you can definitely use that effectively in both live and auto PvP. But the things that we're really going to focus on here is a few. Double Resist gives 25% pierce and missile resist for your allies, which is really huge. And then Maiming Slash decreases the healing power for your targets, but it's also an AoE, and it's not an incredible amount of AP cost, so this is going to be one of your main skills. Drain Rush will absorb 30% of the damage done, and again, this isn't high potency, but it's not low either. And then Concentration there, that's kind of an interesting one. So it's the same thing that Dwayne has. He has Atonement. It gives you 40 slash attack for your allies and yourself, but then also 20 defense penetration for yourself. Now this will give her up to 60% defense penetration and a bunch of slash attack, but you have to be really careful with these concentration skills because they can really affect your AI. They can keep you away from the enemy. If you don't test your pathing, then it can really mess you up. And if you want her to tank with her sub job, then you might have to turn this off, and you might even have to turn Double Resist off, although that one is really strong as well, so definitely something worth considering using on tank. Then for the sub skills, you see there's an AP drain, which is kind of interesting because you do get AP back and you do take it away from an opponent, which is very strong at times, but it's just hard to control in auto. And then Spinning Slash, the reason I'm highlighting this, it's like Hazard Slash for a soldier, but it doesn't take away your HP. But here's the thing, this is actually her strongest skill, and it's on her sub job. And I don't know that you're gonna equip her sub job just for this. And then if you don't, well, look at her slashing attacks. Her strongest attack is 170% potency, so that's definitely something that can't be underrated. Although she does have that defense penetration, her potencies are kind of low. And then when you take a look at Spellblade, it's very straightforward. You have your Spellblade taunt package. So you have Taunting Spell, Resist Magic, and Magic Barrier. And if you have these 3 skills, you can be a magic tank, because Resist Magic is really good. 38% magic resistance plus her 12% from her passive. That's going to put her up to 50%. And then the Magic Barrier, well, a reduction of magic attacks by 50% for 3 times. That's also going to just allow literally anybody to magic tank, because that's half damage. So if you have those 3 things, you can be a magic tank. Now that doesn't mean she's going to be the best magic tank, because those 3 things won't always be active, and you'll have to make sure you can maintain that. Whereas somebody like Rain, somebody like Whisper or Winter Venera, they have natural magic resist and they can take a hit anyway, even without this stuff. Magic Barrier also kind of took a hit with Sakura coming in, because she's got that 3-hit limit break, and that often will just use up your entire Magic Barrier anyway. But so she could be built this way. It's something that you have to consider. Now the dual gunner, this is really interesting to me, and something I have to point out is that this does not really add that much range to her kit. All the skills are about 4 away, and she already could do that with her Maiming Blade. The rest of her skills are about 3 away. The biggest range she gets on a slashing attack is Taunting Spell, but it scales off of magic, so it's not going to be very strong. So one of the weaknesses in Elsirelle's kit is that she actually doesn't have super high range. She's not like like a Raldor or something where she has no range, but she definitely has, she's kind of on the lower end of ranged units, and gunners usually have some sort of passive or active ability that's going to allow them to increase their range. She does not get that, so she can't actually increase her range, but a different gunner could. A gunner could come over and use aimed fire on her, and she would get 1 range, but otherwise dual gunners don't actually have as far range as the what do they call them? The Rangers. And then the gunners, they have like a 5 range on their skills, and dual gunners have 4. So she's not going to get much range from this. She doesn't get missile attack up unless you put the passive on, but then you're missing out on one of the 2 other very strong passives for her. And of course she uses a great sword, not a gun. So that means you're going to just miss out on some missile attack anyway. And there is one reason. So your rapid fire, very cheap skill, longer range range compared to the rest of her kit, so there's some consideration there. Smokescreen, I think you could even run dual gunner straight up for smokescreen, because then you could run her as evade maybe, and you have an evasion buff. You could run her as a tankier bruiser because she has this defense 20 buff. Like, that's really good. And then dual trigger, I'm going to point out because this is the other area where she's going to have a bigger potency. Now, certainly if you use dual gunner, you might not even use her whatever it's called, concentration slash attack buff, because that's not going to affect any of her gunner abilities. And then maybe you just want her to be using smokescreen, you want her to be using that double resist ability instead, and then maybe some TMR abilities, maybe bells. So this is definitely an interesting sub job, but it's not as easy to utilize as you might think. Now we'll take a look at her limit burst, and it's really quite cool. So it's called Goodnight Rumble. Great name, just fantastic name, and it has a high potency, so this will be one of her more damaging skills. It also has a 43 AP cost, and I think there might be a case to use her with bells or just use her with some AP generation, maybe some sort of acquired AP up like Lunaverve or something, because once she uses this skill, she gets AP consumption reduced by 40% for 3 turns, and that's going to allow her to use all of her other abilities. So bells already allows you to use all of your abilities whenever you want them for many turns. So you don't necessarily want bells on her, but you do want a way to maybe get her to her LB very quickly, have her use it, and then kind of coast into some cheap costs for the rest, well, not the rest of the match, but we'll see how long you can get that going on. And if that's not worth it for you, then maybe this is going to be an LB to turn off. But at the same time, it's kind of worth leveling up for her, and most of the time you level up an LB for the secondary effect. So in this case, the AP consumption goes up to 40% from 20%. That's worth it. But in her case, you get that extra damage, and while that's not always a reason to get the LB leveled up for her, it's going to be, again, because her potencies are lower. Okay, so we're going to do some comparisons for her next, and this first comparison is going to be a magic tank one. So we're looking at Winter Venera, and then we'll also look at Rain, because those are 2 very popular magic tanks. Now, I'm not using Whisper here, please don't get at me, because I can't show them all. So you look at the resistances here, and like I said, she doesn't have any natural magic resist. Now Venera also gets that Providence, she gets Providence of Lightning, so she can boost her magic resist as well. The first 2 units there get your magic resist, magic barrier, taunting spell. Rain gets a self taunt and then a magic barrier as well, so they're very comparable in that way. Now obviously Rain is the best because of his spirit, because of his magic barrier that's also his taunting ability, and then because tying his magic stat to his tanking also allows him to do more damage, whereas when you have Spellblade on Elsirelle and Venera, that means they are using Taunting Blade for a cheap AP cost, a high range, to gain aggro, but they're not dealing damage with it. They don't have high magic, and that's kind of a bummer. Now when you look at tanks as well, you have to think about how well they can tank other damage, because people have mixed parties, and in this case I think Elsirelle actually kind of shines. She can take on a gunner HLL team, or she can take on a Kane and a magic team, or whatever it is, because her resists are very good that way, aside from the lack of slash resist. But there are ways to build that if you're going to use something like Leona's Castle, or maybe you're even going to use something like Snow White Guard, and all 3 of them have high HP, so that is possible. But if you're going to use her purely as a magic tank, then I think there's probably better options for you. Even Dario would be a better option, I think, in my opinion, but then certainly Winter Venera, Rain, Whisper, any of those units. Next up is the damage dealer comparison, and we're going to use a few different types here. So the first one is Knight of Ruin Stern, and it's another greatsword user, and he's actually kind of more similar than you might think, because he also has lower attack than you might compare to like Dwayne or other units like the regular Stern, etc. But they have things that those units don't, which is defense penetration. Now in Elsirelle's case, she can get up to 60% defense penetration, whereas Knight of Ruin Stern has 20% innate defense penetration on his kit. However, he also has multiple defense breaks and then slash attack buffs and all sorts of other things in his kit, so he is pretty pretty good at dealing damage, as most of you probably know, but that means that, you know, there's a case to be made for her to be dealing certainly a lot of damage as well. So that's why I wanted to put that comparison there. And then the other comparison is Thancred, because if you look at Thancred, he can't boost his attack any further with his passives. If you use Elsirelle's passive, she can actually get about that 77 attack, which means that puts her just over Thancred's range. So all of a sudden you have two light units, both with similar attack values, Thancred with better potencies, but Elsirelle can have similar resists to Thancred without that magic weakness, and then she can give that to your allies, where Thancred is going to give regen and defense to your allies, and then have really good pierce and projectile resistance. Elsirelle is going to have those things and share them with your allies as well. So I think they're actually quite comparable, and it's making me wish that I hadn't built up my Thancred, because maybe I'd pull for Elsirelle, but at the same time, right before the anniversary, I probably shouldn't be pulling for her. But as far as we can tell here, she stacks up quite well compared to other damage dealers. She certainly looks like an interesting unit. We'll have to talk about what kind of holds her back later on. Here we go for the main attraction. This is Garvall, and he is a dark unit with the new Job Energist sub-job Kodadama wielder, which we're quite familiar with because of Sakura, and then Red Mage, which means we can do some jamming thrust action. And if we take a look at his stats, they're pretty good. The HP is higher than you would expect for a DPS unit, certainly a magic DPS unit. It's actually higher than most other DPSs you could pull up right now. It's not as high as a tank, but it's up there. And then his magic is also very good. His dexterity and luck are lower, as is his agility, but he's going to have some ways to remedy that dexterity and that agility. And then he gets some defense from his Energist and spirit from his Kodadama wielder, and we're going to take a little bit more of a look at his defensive capabilities later. It's actually pretty interesting. And then for his master ability, he gets the increased HP and dark attack up for his allies, and then the increased magic for himself and increased luck for himself. So those are all represented on the graphic in front of you. If we take a look at his resistances, they're really good. So obviously he's going to be weak to light, but then charm resist, stop resist, and don't act resist. Those are all really good to have. That charm resist is insane, and you know that he's going to see play in live PvP. For his damage type resistances, well, they're not that bad either. He's weak to striking and then to magic, but that striking, I just said it's more prevalent, and it really is, but it's still not the worst weakness to get pegged with compared to the other, especially like missile slash. Those are a pretty big deal. Pierce can be, but he has a building point for those, and then he's going to be able to mitigate that magic resistance a little bit. Now his TMR, the Peach Time Brooch, gives you a bit of HP, some defense, and some crit rate, and it's going to have this Fury Surge activated ability that gives you 40% magic for 3 turns, and then magic resist penetration 50 for 3 turns for self. This is a really insane ability, and it's just crazy that this is on an accessory. I'm actually gonna have to pause this recording and see to make sure that everybody can equip it. Yup, looks like every magic user can use this TMR, and it's kind of concerning to me, to be honest. So definitely something to watch out for. This might be worth maxing them just for the TMR, but at the same time, you're not going to regret getting this unit. I can assure you of that. Okay, so let's take a look at his passives, and I'll point out some important stuff along the way. And we can see this new one, Hyper Vitality. This is really interesting. It's going to give 30% agility, 60% magic, 60% dexterity for 5 turns for self. So it's going to last the first 5 turns of any sort of battle that he's in. And what does that translate to? Well, that means 156 magic. It means 16 agility and 99 dex. And I know Prodigy was already talking about how in live PvP this has some implications of how fast he could be and how good he could be as a quicken target. So this is a pretty insane ability, and as long as you're sure that your matches are going to be relatively short, then you can definitely use this. Otherwise, he has his magic up level 1. He has the Chi Flow expansion, so he can get 60% magic without equipping the Hyper Vitality. But then there's other things that are pretty good here, and I want to point out at the bottom, we have Light Spirit's Blessing and Mage's Protection. These are going to be the ways that you can mitigate his magic weakness. You can get some light resistance and then that's good against Sakura. You can get some spirit for that extra magic attack type or any sort of magic based resistance, and then you can get some magic resistance just straight to patch himself up. So those are going to be really interesting. Now if you do want to cover that weakness, it is going to cost you a slot. So if you want to go full DPS, you might not use any of those passives. You might just use Hyper Vitality and then one of your magic ups. And the reason that you would do that is because maybe you're running a tank and you're just hoping that Garvall can not get hit by any magic users and just deal a ton of damage. And the other thing you can do is just not go and fight magic users. You can try to pick some physical attackers, which he was very happy to try to take on. Now what's very interesting is he gets a new counter called Hyper Reactivity. So really this is your physical reflex, and then of course he has magic reflex. So depending on the party that you're targeting, you can use one of these skills to just hopefully luck out and have people miss attacks. But then you can also use his Steal the Ephemeral form to take just less damage some of the time, and that's also a very, very good passive. So you're going to have a hard time picking his counter here. It's going to be very situational, or you can just have Steal the Ephemeral form on at all times and then hope for that damage reduction. So now we get to an interesting part of Garvall's kit. He's going to be using magic-based attacks, but they're not all going to be magic attacks. Now we have seen Spellblades and Rune Knights that have magic-based slash attacks. Garvall actually has magic-based projectile attacks. So this is his basic attack. It has a range height of 1 and it is a projectile shot. It has 3 range there and it's based off of his magic stat. So he doesn't have to get right up to somebody to shoot them with his basic attack, and that's kind of cool. So if we take a look at his energy skills, we're going to see a mix of those two things. So we're going to see he's got some magic attacks here and he's got some projectile attacks as well. So Chi Shot is going to be a very cheap and a very effective projectile attack, which is going to be just great to have those two different damage types. That's a really big deal. And then Pulse here, this is really interesting. It moves to a target panel and then increases your debuff resistance for 3 turns. But this actually has a height of 2, so you can jump up to a panel 2 spaces higher than you. If he doesn't use this in auto, it's going to be insane in manual PvP to reach areas that he can't normally reach because he only has 1 jump. I definitely want to point that out. Twin Chi Rupture is a 245% potency attack. Now it is 48 AP, but that is a really huge potency and that's going to one-shot so many people. And then Chi Barrier, this should look familiar because it is Saintly Wall, but it's his version of it. So it's a damage reduction for physical type damage, 50% for 3 times. That is insane. So he can just reduce physical damage 3 times. So if you don't fight magic attackers, he can really take a few hits. And then Detonation Blast, well, that's a medium type damage attack and it has a 100% hit chance, but it's also a big AoE. So this is an AoE way to hit those evade units, and that's also, again, just such a huge thing to have on your main kit. We're just talking about main kit right now. If we take a look at his sub skills, he gets another projectile attack, and it is a projectile chaining attack, so that can't be underrated. But then we also get Rejuvenation, which is a kind of an interesting ability here. It can inflict sleep, and this is something that you could do to somebody in manual PvP. You could use sleep on them, especially if they're weak to it, and then you could just take advantage of them being asleep to just whack on the rest of the other teams. And I was watching the Let's Talk Tactics from last week, and they were talking about how TP skills are not affected by evade. So whatever TP skill you want to use on an evade unit, it's not going to change anything. So maybe you can put evade units to sleep or something. So this isn't like the most amazing sub job around, but it doesn't matter because this main job is insane. So I think that the Kododama Wielder is going to be an obvious choice for his sub job, and there's some cool things to look at here. The nimble movement is obviously just a good skill to have for auto and for manual, but then you can see he's got another choice of 100% hit attack and then some other good skills. He doesn't really necessarily need them. These are all, except for Earthrending Pain, these are all casting time skills too, so that can be bad sometimes when the AI is just being a dumbass with the casts. But then a Heart Like Needles, that's actually very very good. So increase magic attack by 25 for 3 turns for allies, and then increase your spirit penetration for self. That is a very, very strong skill, and definitely something that you could use on him to kind of keep him with the party, but then also to just increase that ability to deal some serious damage. And then the red mage sub, well, obviously you're going to use this for jamming thrust. I mean, let's be honest, it's so good. It has a huge range, cancels ability activations, and it's good damage as well. So definitely a strong consideration for a sub job. And then, you know, in live you get Kira and Esuna and stuff like that. But then otherwise it's just the jamming thrust. Next up is his limit burst, and it's pretty spicy. So this is concentrated Chi Lancer. It is a magic type, large potency limit burst. It has a spirit break of 30 for 3 turns, and then spirit penetration increased by 50%, which is just crazy. Like, it's honestly, this is going to be so big to open with. It's going to make all of your attacks deal more damage. It's going to deal a bunch of damage, and I think the biggest hang up here is the AP cost. You're certainly going to need to use bells in order to use this limit burst, and he could use it from the start of the battle, but then it's going to completely hamstring your AP, which would be one of the weaknesses that Garvall has, is that he's got that kind of red mage half your max AP starting point, and he needs to build it up. He does have better TP skills than a lot of our other low AP magic users have. Like Howlet has a hard time with AP generation, Rain can sometimes have it, and other red mages and other units like that. But Garvall, he's actually got some pretty good TP skills, so it's not going to be the end of the world. But I think if you're going to use this special, yeah, you're probably going to need to use bells as well. I'm going to make 2 comparisons again, and the first one is going to be to other tanky magic users. So we've got Kilfei, and then we've got Miranda, and you can see that Garvall's obviously got them beat as a DPS. That's not even a question. And he's also got them beat in that he has 2 damage types. He has projectile and magic. Where he doesn't have them beat necessarily is the defense stat. Now Kilfei and Miranda will both get the Holy Knight's Protection 12 defense passive, so they can really raise their defense up. Now Miranda gets Immortal Spirit and Sentinel, and Kilfei also gets a Saintly Wall type defense buff, but Kilfei also can heal herself with White Mage. She can use Protect on Shell on herself and her allies. These 2 units, Kilfei and Miranda, they're ultimately going to be a little bit tankier than Garvall, but he's right up there with them. Like, he gets that Saintly Wall like effect, and he gets that ability to stack some magic and spirit on his kit if he needs to. So he's definitely not Howlet. He's definitely not this totally like magic glass cannon that is just going to get one shot. He has an ability to kind of take some damage, but he's just not going to be quite the level of Kilfei, but he well compensates with that because of how much damage he can deal. So that means that the obvious next comparison is Howlet, and we can take a look. When we look at Garvall's magic, you say, okay, well, yeah, he's like almost 100 lower than Howlet is, but remember, he has that hyper vitality or whatever it's called that's going to give him 156 magic for the first 5 turns. Now Howlet also has a magic buff that he can use called Drain Evocation. He also has increased wind attack. He also has 40% innate spirit penetration. So Howlet has a lot of ways to deal damage too. They're very comparable in that way, but Garvall is going to be able to take a few hits, and I think that's really like such a huge deal. They both have multiple types of damage as well, so they are kind of similar for sure, but I mean, my vote's going to go to Garvall over Howlet just because of that durability, and you kind of need that in order to survive in a lot of PvP environments. Now it's time to talk should you pull, and with Elsirelle, I think it's a matter of bad timing for a pretty decent unit because she has a lot of pros. She has that defense penetration, that accuracy, she's strong against missile and pierce, and she can give those resistances to your party, and she's also got that self-healing, the magic tank, lots of cool applications. However, she does have low skill potencies, her range is kind of short, she needs to get right up in there, and then that no slash resist, and then you have to build her for magic resist. Those are kind of big holes, and I think that could definitely be a deal breaker for her unless you're going to go all in against certain compositions. Now I think there's kind of a hidden application here, and I want to hear what all of you have to say about it, and that is, is Elsirelle a counter to Garvall? And if you think about it, she has good missile resist, she can build magic resist, she can deal good damage against him, and she has good accuracy for the dark teams that will accompany him. So all the Veneras and the Ruinsterns and the different evade units, well, she might be able to deal with them because of her accuracy. And we have lots of ways to increase our dark resistance. So we have the Luminous Bracelet, the Demon Wall Esper, the Scions of Shadow Vision card. So you can actually stack quite a bit of dark resistance, slash resistance, missile resistance, magic resistance, whatever it is. Maybe there's a world where she's actually a counter to him. And this is just kind of some theory crafting, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. But if we're gonna use all of these cases for countering Garvall, well, we could also use Rain because he also has good missile resist. He has magic resist already, and he could be equipped with 2 of the 3 of these things here. So definitely there's going to be other ways to do it. You shouldn't pull on her just to counter Garvall, and we don't even know if that's really going to be a thing or not. Now for Garvall, this has to be the longest pros list I've ever made, and it's just insane. I'm just going to put it up there, and if you want to read it, then by all means pause the video and read it. As for cons, I think the magic weakness is going to be a big deal. I think the fact that you have to build against it, you might not do that. You might just build for magic, and then you could kill a lot of Garvalls with magic. I really do think that's going to be a weakness, and then also weak to light units. That's certainly going to be very important for taking them out quickly. Magic light units, in particular Sakura and Yuna, they're going to deal a lot of damage to him. And then the other thing is the low AP for him. You're going to have to supplement that somehow, if it's bells or something else. But he does have good TP skills, so he's not going to be like Howlet. He's not going to be like Rain. You're going to be able to build up some AP if he buffs long enough with the team, opposed to going right into combat right away. Alright, time for the final verdict, and for Elsirelle, it's unfortunately a no, and I don't think she's a bad unit. I think all units have their uses, but I just don't think that she is good enough to pull considering the timing. With the 1-year anniversary, we're going to get a ton of really cool banners and things that you can pull on with free Visior, so you definitely want to save for that. However, I do think Garvall is worth it. I think he's stood the test of time in JP. He's still being used even during the EX Jobs era, with people using him with all their 120 units, and he's still packing quite the punch. He's still taking people out. He's definitely going to be a unit that's going to stick around for a long time. So if you have the extra Visior or you really like him, then by all means you should go for him. And I think that's definitely going to be a safe investment. And with Elsirelle, like, I almost convinced myself into pulling her, and I ended up not doing that. And at the end of the day, I think that there's some really cool applications there. So you shouldn't feel bad if you were planning on going for her, if she's a fan favorite character of yours. But I think if we're trying to be rational and think about planning for the 1 year and the banners that are going to come after that, then I think unfortunately she's better for you to just grab later on. Eventually she's in the regular pool, build her up over time, and then enjoy her when she's finally yours. But until next time, I want you guys to let me know of your plans in the comments below, and we'll get to chatting.